Hey guys, this is Miss Harlequin, of course. Who else would it be? And for today's lesson, we are going to start drafting the screenplays for our monster novel study. Once again, just to remind you, we are writing an additional scene, kind of like a sequel to Monster. So today we're actually going to start drafting. And in this lesson, I just want to talk a little bit about dialogue because obviously we're writing a screenplay. It's a film script. So this is going to rely on a lot of dialogue. And there's a way to do dialogue well, and there's a way to do dialogue that's just terrible. All right, so today we're going to dig into the actual drafting of the scene. But again, as you do so, you need to make sure that your dialogue sounds realistic, that your characters are speaking clearly, that they're speaking to someone, and they're giving that someone equal airtime. So I don't want to read a script where Steve is just speaking paragraphs and paragraphs and the father is just answering back, okay, sure, all right, son. And you also want their voices to sound genuine. So you want to think about who Steve is as a person, where he grew up. You want to think about the father, the type of language that they would use, the type of tone that they would use, the type of vocabulary that they would use. It's got to sound real. Effective lines of dialogue are, well, the heart of any script. They basically tell the whole story. That's the whole point of a movie or a TV show, right? Is that you're watching people talk. It's got to be in the voice of the character. Again, it has to sound like them. If you're writing from the perspective of an educated man, you're going to use different dialogue than if you were writing from the perspective of, say, Osvaldo Cruz, a 14-year-old gang member from Harlem. They're not going to speak the same way. Dialogue also has to be spoken to another character, which is why in the scene we have Steve and Mr. Harmon talking together. Should be clear and concise, keep it brief. You know, most people, when they're having conversations, they don't talk for like 5 minutes straight without the person responding. It's usually a back and forth. And we also have to keep in mind that we're trying to achieve a writing purpose here. In this case, we want the characters to share their perspectives on the trial. So we want to be able, from the dialogue, to learn about them as characters, about their perspectives, and about the plot of the story. So there should be references to things from the book. That doesn't mean you're including quotes from the book. This is not an essay. This is not a short response. This is creative writing. So we might talk about things that happened in the book because we're the characters and we, quote unquote, live through them. But we're not quoting from the story. All right, so let's look at a model. Let's say that we were doing this exact same task, but instead of it being Steve and the father talking about the trial, it's Mr. Sawicki and Laurel Henry. What would a conversation between those two look like? How would that conversation reveal their perspectives? What kind of things might they say to each other to show how they feel? All right, so let's look at it together. We're going to open up the document. All right, so let's look at the model. First thing I do want to point out to you is the way that it is formatted, because we do need to make our screenplays look like a screenplay, which means we are going to be putting the characters' names all in caps, in bold, and we're going to be aligning it to the center. And the dialogue itself is going to be aligned to the left, which this model actually did not do, so I'm just going to fix it quick. All right, so let's start with Sawicki. You did the right thing with your testimony. They can have a lead to put someone away who deserves to be put away. Miss Henry sips coffee. Yeah, I have to keep thinking that I have done the right thing. Sawicki, are you saying you might think that Steve Harmon might not be innocent? Henry, I'm just saying I might not be sure. I mean, I'm 58 years old. Sawicki, come on, I've known this kid for a long time. He's a student at Stuyvesant, one of the most prestigious schools in New York. Do you think that the staff there wants a criminal in their classrooms? Steve has also been a student in my heart that I shall never forget. Miss Henry sips coffee again. Wow, you really believe in this young man. If you are, Sawicki, if you are implying that I was merely lying at the trial to free Steve because he is a young man that I extremely admire, I assure you that I'm being completely honest about Steve's character. When I found out that he was in prison, I was very surprised. A role model student trying to rob a drugstore, it makes no logical sense to me in any way. Okay, so you can see from the model dialogue that both Mr. Sawicki and Miss Henry, they're referring to things from the book. They're using details that we know about from the book, like Mr. Sawicki mentioning that Steve went to Stuyvesant and how close they are. Obviously, That's an inference we can make because Mr. Sawicki testified on Steve's behalf and talked about watching a lot of his film footage and feeling close to Steve, feeling like he knew him. So that's a good inference to then use in your dialogue where you're having Mr. Sawicki talk about his feelings. The same thing for Miss Henry. We know from the story that Miss Henry was hesitant to testify, and that does come across in her dialogue. You know, so you can see how that student used stuff from the story to help them write their scene. So let's explore that a little bit more with the thinking generator. On the slide in front of you, you have a quote from the original text, and then you have something that I'm writing from my version of the script. So have I effectively taken details from the story, text evidence, things that I know happened in Walter Dean Meyer's original story to use to come up with dialogue for my script? In other words, have I taken something from the book and effectively used it to show Steve's perspective, something he would say to his father that would show what he's feeling and what he's thinking? So in the original text, from page 280, it said, "After the trial, my father, with tears in his eyes, held me close and said that he was thankful that I did not go to jail. He moved away, and the distance between us seemed to grow bigger and bigger." So based on that detail, I now, in my script, have Steve saying, "Dad, there's something that has been bugging me ever since the trial ended. Why has the distance between us grown bigger and bigger?" All right, so what is your opinion? Do you think this is an effective use of text evidence, and why? All right, so now let's go into our scripts. You're going to log into Google Classroom. You're going to open the assignment. I've attached a template that you're going to use to write your draft. I also want you to use the model screenplay format slide to follow the proper formatting for your draft. Once again, I mentioned it when I showed the sample before. You have to make your screenplay look like a screenplay. So it has to be aligned. The dialogue has to look correctly. You have to use bold when bold is appropriate. You have to use parentheses and italics when that's appropriate. So a couple of things to go over. Camera directions are always in all caps. You can see it in the original Monster. So when the camera's fading in, or it's describing the setting, like that it's an interior, or they're using a camera direction abbreviation like VO for voiceover, or they're telling you that the camera's cutting to something. Again, those are all caps, and it's all bold. Anything that is stage direction has to be in bold. Setting, not only if it's interior and exterior, but also like the location of the scene, that has to be in all caps. Dialogue should not be indented. You just keep it aligned to the left margin the regular way. You have to use colons to introduce directions after a camera or setting direction. So colons are the two dots, right on top of each other. A dot and then a dot underneath it. All character names, no matter where they are in the stage directions only, have to be in all caps. If a character in dialogue says somebody's name, that does not have to be in all caps. The speaker's name has to be above the dialogue. It's got to be in all caps. It's got to be in bold. And it has to be aligned to the center of the page. And once you use a camera direction once, like I said voiceover here in the dialogue introduction, after that you can start to use the abbreviation. So you don't have to keep writing voiceover. You can start to write VO. Just like if it's a medium shot, you first write out the word medium shot at the beginning of the scene, and then everything after that, once you identify in parentheses what the abbreviation is, everything after that can just be the abbreviation. All right, so log into your Google Classroom, which should already be open. Open up the template. Start drafting. I'll be looking over drafts and obviously giving comments and feedback as you go along. Since this is the first day of drafting, I'm going to ask that everybody has at least the first page and a half to 2 pages written today.